Good evening, UK Crime Book Club. I am here with Sir Ian Rankin, and we've got lots to talk about. I've got about 1,000 questions to get through, and I'm sure the members are going to have quite a few to ask as well. So, would you like to introduce yourself and show off some books?
Hello. Yeah, I am Ian Rankin. Surprise, surprise. Show you some books. Well, the latest offering I've got is only on audio and ebook, so I can't really show you that. I don't even possess a Kindle.
I will get that up on my phone and show the cover.
Yeah, okay, you can show them the cover. I mean, you know what it is. It's a high-rise building. Come on. It's pretty straightforward. What have I got? I've got a jigsaw for you. This is one of the biggest thrills I've had as a published author, was that there's a company that does literary jigsaws. You might have seen them in bookshops. There'll be a Jane Austen one, a Shakespeare one, a Dickens one, or what have you. Oh, there we go. There's
Can't kind of see it because of my light, but
yeah. Well, it
get the idea.
It is what it is. But back to me. So this company, who mostly do dead authors, Jane Austen, stuff like that, decided they wanted to do a rebus, and so it was a lot of fun working with them and deciding what we could put in, which elements, which books to put in. There's a little playlist. You can scan the playlist and listen to Rebus's playlist while you do it. So it's a lot of fun, and there's lots of little characters for you to find, Cafferty and Siobhan Clarke and me. And originally, I thought I was standing outside the Oxford Bar, but in fact, I'm not. I'm standing somewhere else. So I've done it, and I can recommend it for all ages. So that's that, and I've got the last two Rebus books. So, yeah. So, yeah, and this, I've not written a book this year because this is my sabbatical year. My wife said it was a sabbatical year or divorce. So
nice to know you still like your wife. Good
well,
choice.
I actually asked my accountant which is cheaper.
Andrew Houchin, who is my friend, one of our members, wanted me to say hello to you because he met you at an event a while ago, and he's been excitedly messaging me for a couple of days. So there you go, Andrew. We've said hello now.
Nice, good. Well, I hope a few people are having a little drink while we're doing this. Oh God, that's got too fizzy.
Do you want to tell everyone what you've got?
This was given to me by a mate of mine as a journalist. I was down in London a few days ago, and they gave me a few bottles of Norfolk beer. This is Barsham, Norfolk born and brewed, Norfolk Topper, which is a citrus ale, 3.8%. There you go. I had to schlep these back on the train from London, but they survived. 3.8, not bad. That's an evening beer.
Absolutely, yeah. Mine is Foster's, which is 3.7. So.
Foster's Australian, the original.
Absolutely.
That is class.
As fancy as I am.
That is class.
We have got lots of hellos already, so I'm not going to go through everybody's names, but hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. So you've just mentioned, I don't know if you have just mentioned it, I've just imagined it. So you were going to be an accountant, but you're now credited with being part of a shift towards making crime fiction accessible and popular. That's quite a difference.
Yeah. Well, I was brought up a working class. You know, my parents left school at 14, 15. They worked in factories or shops all their lives. I was the first member of the family who was going to go to university. And I had one uncle who was an accountant in Bradford in Yorkshire. And he owned his own house and he owned his own car, and he was about the only member of the family who did. So it was suggested to me at some point around about the age of 15 or 16 that maybe I should study accountancy at university so I could get a good job at the end of it. That's, if you're working class, you go to university to get a career, to get a good job. So my parents were set on me doing that, and I was fairly set on doing that. I never really thought about it until I was 17, and I just scraped a pass in my economics exam at school. And I thought, why the hell am I going to university to study a subject I'm not very good at and have no interest in, just so I can get a job at the end of it? So I had to break the news to my parents that really my passion was books. And what I wanted to do was to go to Edinburgh University and study literature. And I think they were disappointed. hugely disappointed that I wasn't going to be able to keep them in a lifestyle to which they would have become accustomed in their retirement. And one of the great sadnesses is that neither of them lived to see me be successful. My mum died when I was at the end of my first year at uni, and my dad died when I was 29. So I'd had 2 books published by the time my dad passed, but not successfully, I've got to say. So yeah, it would be nice to be able to say to them, look, reading books paid off in the end. Reading books led me here.
At what point do you feel like your first success happened? What number book were you on?
It was very late. It was very late, and I'm not sure that writers these days would be given the amount of time to be nurtured, the time that I got. Back in the day when I started in this game, if publishers liked you and your style, they kept you on even though you were making them a loss, because they had other authors who were making them money, so they could subsidize you. I think these days you've got to make it quick or you get dropped. So I was writing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 books, not making any money from our publisher. Black and Blue was the kind of breakthrough Rebus novel. That was Rebus novel number 8, maybe. It was a breakthrough in that it won the Gold Dagger, but it still didn't hit the bestseller lists. It was another 3 or 4 books before I was getting to number 1. So it was 12 Rebus novels and maybe 6 other novels published before I got to number 1 in the charts. That's a long, long apprenticeship. But I do remember the first time that I thought, this is it, Ian, you've made it. And I was on tour in America, and I was staying in some really grotty motel in the Midwest in winter. I was snowed in, I think. The event was cancelled that I was supposed to do. Couldn't get to the event because of the amount of snow. So I was just sitting in this motel room, feeling a bit sorry for myself. And I phoned home to my wife, which is hugely expensive from the States. This is pre-mobile phones. And she said, there's a mistake. Your 6 monthly royalty statements come in for all your backlist books, and it's in 6 figures. And I went, oh, yes, that's a mistake. So I phoned up my agent, and he went, no. And that was the cumulative effect of people buying the backlist because they'd read a Rebus, liked it, and decided to buy all the other ones. And so I thought, well, that's it. Suddenly, I could afford a mortgage.
You could afford your phone call.
I could just about afford the phone.
I remember seeing Elton John in an interview say something similar, that it kind of tanked at the beginning for him and he needed that time. So it's really interesting to hear you say that, and I wonder how many people are really given that time these days.
Yeah, I think publishing has changed so much that you don't get given, you're not allowed to lose money for your publisher. It's bean counters and accountants who are in charge now. People like I might have become if I hadn't been any good at writing. And yeah, they want the success, and if they don't get it quickly, they'll move on. They lose interest in you. I mean, for the Rebus novels 4, 5, 6, 7, before I wrote Black and Blue, I always thought I was on the verge of being dropped because I really wasn't making any money from my publisher. And I was seen as being mid-list. Mid-list is where you've been around for a while, so nobody can be very excited about you. You're not breaking the mold. You're just doing the same thing as before. And even when I handed Black and Blue over to my publisher, they went, "Oh, it's another Rebus book." I don't think they realised what a jump in quality it was until it won the Gold Dagger, and then they realised that maybe they didn't need to drop me after all.
Lucky them that they didn't.
Well, lucky me that won the Gold Dagger.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know. It's a really nice feeling, and it must be for you as well, not only to win, but to see your colleagues succeed in that way, because you know what a big deal it is and how helpful it can be for a career.
Yeah. I mean, prizes are a big. I mean, in the end, right from the get-go with me, prizes were a big boost to morale. When I was at high school, I wrote a poem and put it in for a poetry competition, and it won second prize. And I thought, oh, that's it, I'm a poet. So when I arrived as an undergraduate at Edinburgh Uni, I was writing poetry, smoking a pipe, wearing a tweed jacket. And then I entered a short story competition, and again, I came second. Following year, I entered a different competition and came first. And so, yeah, that just makes you think, okay, the stuff I'm doing is okay. The stuff I'm doing is worth doing. I'll keep trying. And so, yeah, the Gold Dagger was a huge boost to me morally and psychologically, as well as financially.
Mm. And it's obviously not the only award you've won. You've won things all over the world.
Yeah, I mean, you get to my stage in the game, you start to think about the ones you've not won rather than the ones that you have won.
So what's on the list? What's on the wish list, Ian?
What have I not won? I've not won the well, I've never won the Theakston's, the Harrogate Prize, Bloody Scotland, the McIlvanney Prize. I've won one of the ones in America, but there are 3 or 4 in America. Which one have I won? I've won the Edgar, but that's the only one I've won in America. I don't know. I think I'm at a stage where people go, "Nah, he's come on, we're not going to give it to him. He's got everything else." You know, let's move along. Let's get some fresh blood in here. Let's get the youngsters in here and give them some prizes. I mean, when he gave me the Diamond Dagger, which was quite a while ago, which is a lifetime achievement, I thought, bloody hell. You know, I was about 50 years old. I thought, I've still got a lot of books left in me. It's not like I'm giving up. I'm not retiring. Maybe you could hold off on that lifetime achievement prize for a bit longer.
You did actually have to retire Rebus at one point, but then you managed to bring him back. So I found that really interesting. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, I decided quite early on that Rebus would live more or less in real time, because I wanted to show the way society has changed, and the UK has changed, and Scotland is changing. How can you do that if your character doesn't change? So I decided that he would age, which eventually gave me a problem. I got a phone call from a cop in Edinburgh, and he said, "How old is Rebus?" I sort of totted it up in my head and thought, well, he must be about 60. Why? He said, he's got to retire at 60. I went, what? I thought it was 65. He went, no. He said, it's 55 in Scotland if you're a uniformed officer and 60 if you're CID. So I said to my publisher, I said, look, I'm sorry, but the next book is going to be the final book. And he tried to talk me out of it. But I thought, this is it. I mean, if I'm going to keep this realistic, this series, then he will hit a point where he's got to retire. And so when I wrote Exit Music, which was book number 17, I thought that was it. I thought I was done with this guy. And so I started writing things that weren't Rebus. I wrote a heist novel and I introduced a new character called Malcolm Fox, etc., etc. But then I got an idea for a book about a cold case, an unsolved case. And there was a unit in Edinburgh that dealt with unsolved cases. And it was staffed by 1 serving police officer and 3 retired detectives. And I thought, well, this is perfect for Rebus. This is what he would be doing. He would not have just shuffled off to retire in Marbella or play golf. He would be begging him to let him back in. So he came back for that one book, and then he just somehow stuck around for a while. And now he's properly retired, and he's got health issues and all the rest of it. So I don't know what. I mean, realistically, I always try and keep the books as realistic as I possibly can. You've got to believe in this guy. I think it's getting harder and harder to believe that a man in his, getting on for 70, if not more than 70, could inveigle himself into a police investigation.
I think your readers are just probably willing to overlook it as long as they keep getting the books.
Yeah,
I think it has to be a bit of give and take there, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's how much I'm willing to have the give and take. Look, one of us has got to go eventually, me or him. One of us will die. I mean, I'll definitely die. But we know that fictional characters can live on, weirdly, once their creator has shuffled off this mortal coil. So who knows what lies in store for Rebus? Young Rebus. The Adventures of Young Rebus, written by somebody else, once I've popped my clogs.
Do you not fancy tackling that yourself?
For years I said I wouldn't, because it would be a historical novel, which means a lot of research. And research takes time.
That's quite disturbing, isn't it? That would be historical.
Well, I mean, I would imagine I'm setting it in the 80s, right? If I'm going back to him when he was a young detective, it'd be the 1980s. Well, I don't know. How much was a pint of beer in the 80s? How much was a newspaper? What? Yeah, I mean, all that kind of stuff. What technology was available? Did cars have central locking? I mean, all that stuff. I would need to do some research on. But I always said I wouldn't do it. And then I did a continuation novel of William McIlvanney's character Laidlaw. William McIlvanney had started this book, or started taking notes for this book, and then died. And his widow wanted me to have a look at it and see if I thought there was a novel there that could be salvaged or finished. And the book was set in 1972. And I knew that because he referenced the film of The Godfather. Characters had been to see The Godfather at the cinema. So I Googled when that would have been, and it would have been the summer to the autumn of 1972. I thought, okay, well, I better do some research in 1972. And it was actually quite freeing because all the stuff that we contemporary crime writers have to take on board, I didn't have to take on board for a book set in 72. You didn't have to factor in mobile phones or CCTV or the internet, computers, DNA analysis of a crime scene. I mean, that was in its infancy if it existed at all. So it made it, it meant that the cops really were having to depend on informers on the street and their own kind of savvy, their own knowledge. And that was really, I found that refreshing. So that made me think there is the possibility that if I get a bit stuck with writing about the present day, I could go and write a Rebus novel in the 80s. And at least I'd have some fun researching the music.
Absolutely. We should talk about the rise. It's the whole reason that you're here. And I promise, look at member questions as well. I know I've got loads, but I will go through those too. I absolutely loved it. I mean, it's just how much you managed to fit in one story, and the depth of the characters is just quite astonishing. It's like a masterclass in getting started in writing. You know, anyone who's struggling with it, you just know, you can just see how much has happened. So one of the things I was thinking was you picked the perfect place for the setting. There's not many places that you could have set it, but I think you picked the right one.
Yeah, well, so let people know this. It's this is available only as an ebook or an audio download. It's Amazon. The Great Beast, you know, asked me if I fancied writing something a bit different for a new market, for a new audience. And these are stories, I mean, hopefully other authors are going to do this as well, that can be read in a single sitting. So it takes about an hour and a half to read. It takes about an hour and a half to listen to. So if you're on a commute or a car journey or something, it's just about perfect. Or if you want a nice quick read and on holiday. And they said, stretch yourself, you know, get out your comfort zone, do something you've not done, or you know, something you can't do with Rebus. And I'd been fascinated by all these shady characters bringing their money to London. You know, oligarchs, tech billionaires, Saudi princes and princesses and sheikhs. All this quite dark money is swirling around London. And I've read non-fiction books by financial journalists about this. And I've wandered through or driven through the dark streets of central London and seen these big apartment blocks where none of the lights are on because nobody lives there. It's just a place to hide your money away from your own government or people that you stole it from. So I just thought, brilliant scene for it. And I think as I was going past one of them, I saw the only bit lit up was the front entrance hall, the foyer. And there was a security guard sitting there all night behind the desk. And I thought, God, how weird to be the only person in that building and you've got to patrol the building from time to time. And then I started to, sorry about this guy, but I started to see him dead. I saw him just dead lying on the floor and someone had killed him and who had killed him and why. So that was it. And in some ways, it's a kind of classic Agatha Christie style thing because you've got a lot of people from the upper echelons of society that are suddenly suspect. You've got almost like a locked room mystery. This is a building that should be secure, that's got lots of CCTV cameras and security elements to it everywhere. So how could you get in, kill somebody and get out again? And then I just had introduced a couple of detectives. And that was it. I had my story. And the length was supposed to be between 5,000 and 10,000 words. And I think mine was at the upper end of that. It's about 10,000 words, maybe even a wee bit more because I was enjoying the characters. There was more I could do with the characters. And even at the length that it was at, which is a long short story, I thought, oh, you know, I would like to spend more time with you. There's more I could do with you, whether it was the suspects or whether it was the cops in charge of the case. There were some great characters that I just stumbled across as I started writing the story. It was a lot of fun to write.
And every single person that was present in these apartments, so they're all kind of £10 million apartments in this block, and there's hardly anybody that lives there, which kind of makes it easier. You know, not too many people. I don't think you could have maybe fitted 24, apartment full of people. But I loved how different each one was and how different each story for the person was and how much depth of character you gave in just those few words that you had for each person.
Well, although my novels can be quite long, I'm a huge fan of writers who write short books. When I was at university, having finished my degree, I then did a PhD thesis on the novels of Muriel Spark. And Muriel Spark, wonderful Edinburgh-born novelist, her most famous book, The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie, was originally published in a single issue of the New Yorker magazine. That's how short it is. In the Penguin edition, it's about 125 pages. You can read it in an afternoon, but it's a TARDIS. On the outside, it's small. On the inside, it's vast. And every time I read it, and I must have reread it a dozen times during the course of my life, I see something I haven't seen before. And Muriel Spark started life writing poetry. And I started my life writing song lyrics and poems when I was a kid. And there's something about that concision. I just love it when you find the right sentence that tells you a lot about a character. So, for example, in this new story, I've got a cop who only features in a couple of scenes very briefly called Amberson. And one of the cops says to the other one, "Why is she always chewing gum? It really annoys me. I wish she would stop chewing gum." Another cop says, "If she wasn't chewing gum, she'd be smoking 40 a day." And to me, that told you quite a lot about the character of Amberson. You don't need to see her do that. You just, two people having a quick conversation about her fills in quite a bit of detail about her, the kind of person she is. And that sort of shorthand, which poets use all the time. Novelists are the laziest writers in the world, right? Because we get as many words as we need, as many words as we feel we need. Poets don't get that. Short story writers don't get that. Playwrights don't get that. Film script writers don't get that. We can have 600-page novels, 800-page novels, 1,000-page novels. But what I've noticed is, as I'm getting older, my books are getting shorter again. And I think it's because I'm always afraid I'm going to die before I finish writing the book. So, or maybe it's just that I realize that the perfect length for a crime novel is about 300 pages. And everything on top of that is filling or contrivance or something. And the last few books I've done have been around about the 300-page mark, and that seems to suit me quite nicely. The catch, the reason that, several reasons why crime novels got very long. One is the computer came along, made it easier to write long books. When you had just either handwritten books or you had typewriters, correcting stuff, adding stuff, taking stuff away was laborious. Computers made it easy, so you kept writing and kept writing and kept writing. And the other thing is that the publishers realized that if a book, well, in fact, somebody told me this, it was an editor who told me this, if a book is under 300 pages, it's just a whodunit. If you can bulk it up, it starts to look like a serious book, like a book that might be taken on serious themes or have some literary worth. So we all started doing it. We all started doing 400 or 500-page books. And then people thought they were getting their money's worth when they bought them. You get quite a lot of bang for your buck in a 500-page book.
The book that you just mentioned, which is written on a Post-it note somewhere in front of me, you have a signed copy of that.
What's that?
Jean
Brodie? Miss Jean Brodie?
Yes.
The Prime Miss Jean Brodie. I've got a signed first edition, yeah. Muriel Spark I only ever met once. It was a year before she died, and she came back she lived in Italy, but she came back to Edinburgh to do the Edinburgh Book Festival. And I took 2 huge shopping bags of first editions with me, my entire collection of her books. And it was a party for her after her event, but she was old and she was tired and she wasn't well. And so I got to meet her, but I just thought I'm just going to pluck one book out. And of course I plucked out Miss Jean Brodie. And she signed that to me. And there was a photographer there who got a lovely picture of the two of us, me looking like a complete fanboy. As she sits there and signs this book to me. It meant a lot to me that she did that. Yeah, that's one of the things. And people often ask you, what would you save in a fire? And I would save my first edition of. You know why I'm slowing down here? I'm slowing down because I actually don't have it at the moment. I loaned it to a friend of mine for an exhibition he's got on. So he better not have a fire. But yeah, that's the one sort of personal thing I would rescue from a fire would probably be my Either that or the William McIlvanney book that he signed to me. William McIlvanney was a huge influence on me in the early days, as on many Scottish crime writers. And I remember stalking him at the Edinburgh Book Festival in 1985 before I was published. And I grabbed him and I said, "Look, I'm writing a book just now that's a bit like your Glasgow-based detective novels featuring Inspector Laidlaw, but set here in Edinburgh." They went, "Oh yeah, interesting." I said, "Well, you sign this for me?" And I had one of his books, and he signed it, "Good luck with the Edinburgh Laidlaw." To Ian Rankin, "Good luck with the Edinburgh Laidlaw," and I've still got that somewhere. That was a real thrill as well, because later on when I met him and I was publishing everything, he was able to write another dedication to me that said, "The Edinburgh Laidlaw did good."
Which leads me really nicely. It's like we've scripted this to my next question, which is so a kind of fan moment that's had an impact on you. So maybe something from one of your books where your words have had an impact in some way, or something maybe unusual that a fan's done, such as a tattoo, or I don't know. I mean, you've been to a lot of places all over the world and people have different ideas of, what's a good idea.
Well, I mean, people try and give you ideas all the time. And I went to buy light bulbs today, and an old guy stopped me to tell me the story of his fight for justice, the fact that he was suing the chief of police Scotland and stuff like that. I just wanted to buy light bulbs. Yeah, I mean, people ask. You go around the world, people ask you questions. They say, "What's your favorite cheese? What does this ring? What's this ring for?" Yeah, one woman did get my signature tattooed on the back of her neck. One woman used to collect autographs on her crash helmet, and she'd have to get them renewed every year because the crash helmet would get kind of blurry. Yeah, I mean, all of that.
That's quite unusual.
Yeah, well, there are some unusual people out there. There are some unique people in the world. The one that always stumps me is whenever you get somebody young or old, they'll come up and say, "I'm trying to get published. I'm writing, but I don't know how to go about it." And I go, I really don't know how to help you, because the world of publishing has changed so much since I got into it. It still needs an element of luck. It needs an element of writing the right book at the right time. And you can't always plan that. You can't always pre-plan what kind of book the world is looking for. So, I mean, again, that's an element of luck involved in it, being in the right place at the right time, getting the book or the piece of writing to the right publisher. And of course, now you've got self-publishing. Now you can do a deal with Amazon and you can publish anything. You can go on the web and publish anything, and you can give it away for free, or you can sell it for 99p, and you can make a reputation that way, and you can actually make a really good living eventually that way. But you've got to be quite confident, and you've got to sell yourself. You've got to be marketing yourself all the time. And of course, the more time you spend doing that, the less time you're doing writing the actual books. And not everybody can do it. I mean, very few writers get into writing because they are gregarious, outward, sociable human beings. We're mostly the shy, awkward, weird kids at school, who just want to go home, sit in their bedroom, listen to Pink Floyd and write poems.
I've been listening to Manic Street Preachers today, which is, This Is My Truth, Tell Me Yours. Yeah.
Which I quoted on the front of recent.
Yeah, that's what made me. I was like glancing through notes and things that I've written today.
This is off on a tangent, but they are the most literate band I've ever come across. I've met them several times. The first time they wanted to meet me backstage, they were playing the Usher Hall in Edinburgh, and they'd been name checking me. They played a couple of gigs in Scotland, and people had got in touch with me and said, "Oh, you're getting name checked at these Manic Street Preachers gigs." I went, "Really?" So I got in touch, and he invited me along, and all they wanted to talk about was Scottish literature, was books and writers, and it was just, I was absolutely bowled over. And I've done, I've met them a few times since, and just a lovely bunch of blokes. What can I tell you? It's one of the nice things about being a successful writer who uses music a lot in their books, is that musicians sort of get to know you, they know of you, and eventually you sometimes get to meet those heroes of yours, and often you even get to work with them. You get to write lyrics. There's a musician in Scotland just put an album out recently, and amongst the writers who have provided lyrics for him are me and Val McDermott. I mean, what a buzz, what a thrill. So if you Google Mull Historical Society, you'll find his new album, and on his new album you'll find songs with tunes by him and lyrics by the likes of me and Val McDermott.
How about Best Picture? You performed at Kendall Calling.
Yeah, we did. That was our first ever gig. Best Picture was my band. I say past tense. We seem to have gone into the abyss a little bit. Yeah, it was mostly journalists, a couple of journalists, a professional musician, Bobby from the Glasgow band the Bluebells, a keyboard player who was a doctor, and a bassist who was a sociology researcher. The drummer was a journalist, and so was the lead guitarist. And it needed somebody to write some lyrics, and I said, well, I'll give it a go. It's been 40 years since I did it, but let's try it again. And so, yeah, I was the vocalist in Best Picture. And our first ever gig, we were invited by Tim from the Charlatans, who's got his own little festival within a festival at Kendall Calling, to go along and play at his little festival. So that was our first ever gig. It was quite a start to proceedings. And then we played our last gig in December 2019, supporting a band in Glasgow on the run up to Christmas. And then COVID came along and we couldn't practice, we couldn't meet. And that just seemed to be the end of it. But we did produce one single. I think I've got the only copies left. I think they're sitting in my other room here somewhere in a box. But we made one single, which was what I wanted to achieve, really. And that was my Christmas presents for that year to all my family. It was just, that was the cheapest Christmas present. Well, until the Jigsaw came along, that was the best Christmas present I could give them ever.
So that's what everybody got for Christmas, the Jigsaw?
All my family, all my friends, complete strangers, people in the pub, they all got a Jigsaw for Christmas. Until I ran out.
I found out, and I didn't know this, you had the Oxford Bar had something fitted because
You've done some digging, I'll tell you. You've done some digging.
I have done so much digging.
You've done some digging.
I felt a bit stalkerish, but it's nice digging.
Well, look, when I started writing these books, I was young and naive, and I thought fiction had to be fictitious. So in the early books, Rebus works in a fictitious police station. I don't mention the street he lives in. He drinks in fictitious pubs. But then people in Edinburgh start to say that's obviously that police station, that pub, that street. So I started naming places. Mm-hmm. And amongst them, I named the Oxford Bar, which is the bar in Edinburgh where I drink and where I used to drink as a student, and I still do drink. And when I thought this is perfect for Rebus. I was writing the first Rebus book the first time I went in there, and it was full of off-duty cops and lawyers and all sorts. I just thought perfect. So I decided that was going to be Rebus's place. But some of the early books were written either in London or in France. My wife and I lived 4 years in London, 6 years in France. So for 10 years, I was writing Rebus books, not living in Edinburgh. And a few mistakes crept in. And one of them was that I misremembered the Oxford Bar, the actual bar, the counter, having a little foot rail along the bottom of it that you could rest your foot on while you stood at the bar and drank. Didn't exist. And people started writing to me and saying, look, the Oxford Bar has no foot rail. This is a terrible error that you've made here. So Harry Cullen, who at that time was the owner of the Oxford Bar, installed a foot rail. He always said he was going to charge me for it. He was going to send me the bill, but he never did, God bless him.
Probably because he made enough beer money from readers coming in.
Well, I think that possibly, things are tight at the moment. I think Rebus fans, probably about half the clientele that goes in there are sort of tourists on holiday who come in to see where Rebus drinks. I always feel a bit sad, actually, a bit sorry for people who come in looking for Rebus, usually overseas tourists. And of course, he's not there. It's me. And I'm just not nearly as interesting as him. I'm not as complex, as dark, as brooding, as prone to violence, as angry, as dissolute, all of that. So they're looking for this guy and they don't find him. They find this guy sitting in a corner with a quiet pint doing a crossword.
I mean, I'm glad you're not prone to violence, but you're not exactly a dull man.
Well, I think writers are fairly dull because we get all our adventures inside our heads and on the page. Rebus gets to have lots of adventures that I would could never have in real life, and I get to live vicariously through him. But in reality, I'm still the same geeky 17-year-old who would sit in his room writing love poems to girls he couldn't talk to in the school playground. I don't think I've moved on too far. I still wear the same clothes and I still listen to the same bloody music.
I feel like I'm stuck in some sort of time loop like that as well. I will go to some of the comments. So Hobeck Books wants to thank you for doing their podcast, which you did a couple of years ago, I believe.
Yeah.
Lindsay Lynn wants to know if you are, I should say, Hobeck Books are a small indie publisher. So please do go and take a look at their books, everyone who's watching. Lindsay Lynn wants to know, will we see more Malcolm Fox?
I don't know. I really don't. I mean, I'm mulling over the next book at the moment, and I'm not sure there's a role for Malcolm in it, but you never know. Sometimes characters just force their way in, they barge into the story without you meaning for them to be there. They just insist on being part of the story. So I won't know until I start writing it, really.
Steve Munoz has, hi Steve, has asked, he's over in California, is Steve. It's one of my favourite people in the world. He said, on the same theme, Malcolm Fox books are fantastic. Would you ever consider writing a few more centred on him as the main character?
Yeah, it's interesting that, because quite a lot of people, I mean, I did an event in London on Friday and somebody came up to say how much they disliked Malcolm Fox.
Right, okay.
They find him boring. They find him, they don't like him. They just find him unlikable. And that's kind of part of his role, actually, because he is the anti-Rebus. And if you like Rebus, you're probably not going to like Fox, because they're very different. And Fox is always on the, you always wonder if Fox is trying to take Rebus down, is trying to get him put in jail or kicked off the force or whatever, depending on where we are in Rebus's life. I quite like Malcolm Fox. I mean, he's a guy who wishes he was a man of action, but is not suited to the role. And the role that he's very suited to, which is being a pen pusher, he actually doesn't much like. In some ways, he's probably a lot more like me than Rebus is. But then most characters in my books are more like me than Rebus is.
Somebody else has asked if we'll see a Gillian or Gillian, I wasn't sure, Gish series. So she's the main character in The Rise, and she's really interesting, really likable. People trust her very quickly. It's very obvious who she is very quickly.
Yeah,
and she'd be fascinating to read more.
Yeah, I did like her a lot, and I'm not sure that a long short story is enough to contain Gish. I think she maybe needs something else. What I would really like is for the Rise to become a TV show or a film. I think it's very filmic. I think it's very visual.
Yeah.
And I think it would look great on the big screen, or indeed on the small screen, with a kind of big high rise and all the glossy glass windows and everything. But let's wait and see. If anybody from TV or film is watching, hello, I'm available. She's a good character, and again, she just jumped into my head. You know, I had this dead body on the floor, the concierge on the floor of this glamorous building. I thought, okay, the cops are arriving, and I just saw her in my head arriving by bicycle. And she arrives by bicycle because she wants to save the planet, because it's the quickest way of getting around London, and because you can't park anywhere, even if you do get into central London in your car. And so I thought, okay, that tells me quite. The fact that she's a cyclist is telling me quite a lot about her already. A bit like the gum-chewing Amberson.
Yeah.
The kind of cycling, who named all her gear. She has to put her gear somewhere, so she's asking the guy at the scene of crime van, "Can I leave my gear with you, my bag and all my stuff and my outerwear, while I go into this building and try and solve this grisly murder?" She is, and she's got a mother at home who's not well, and she's got carers who come in and neighbours who look after her. And she does seem like a very three-dimensional character to me. So hopefully there is life left in her.
We love to see it, absolutely. So Andrew, who I mentioned earlier that you've met previously, he's currently reading A Song for the Good Times. He's enjoying it. There's a character called Graham Sutherland. I have not come across him in other books about Rebus, but as I read, I can picture Rebus and Siobhan as I am reading, from Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, I try not to describe my characters too much because I want readers to do it for me. I always think it's annoying if you see a film and then you try and read the book and you go, well, that's not the one for me is always One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, where in the book the main character is not Jack Nicholson, nothing like Jack Nicholson. But if you have seen the film of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, it's impossible to read the book and not see Jack Nicholson in that role. And I just want readers to do, well, I want them to do all the work for me. I don't want to describe the characters in detail. I want readers to decide what they look like. I've got no idea what Rebus looks like. I'm usually inside his head looking out. I don't really know what Siobhan Clarke looks like. Fox I've described once or twice as a big bear of a guy whose name Fox belies the fact that he's a man of some heft and stature. That's about it. I like, it's often I hope the name, given, the name you give somebody can maybe tell you something about them. Big Ger Cafferty. I think readers get an image of what this gangster is like just from the name Big Ger Cafferty. And I once, for a TV show a long time ago, they did ask me to do an ID, one of these kind of visual ID, like if I was IDing a suspect for the police, and it was using a kind of computerized visual thing, and we tried to put together a picture of Big Ger Cafferty, and he came out, and I thought, yeah, that's not really him either. I mean, I've just described him, and you've put this picture together, but that's not him. You've not quite caught him. I know what these people are like. I just don't know what they look like.
How do you feel about the idea? Do you ever watch the shows of your books? Because I know if I'm reading an ongoing series, for example, the Tom Thorne series by Mark Billingham, I know he's having a little break at the minute, but he's assured me there will be more of them. I couldn't watch it because for me, David Morrissey isn't my Thorne. I don't know who my Thorne is. I have kind of an idea of him, but it's more a smell and a sense of him rather than the smell is the leather jacket, just to be clear, not being weird. But I can't have that face and voice and everything put in my head if I'm going to read more books. How is that for you?
Yeah, no, I don't watch the TV manifestations of Rebus for that reason. I don't want to start writing the books with actors in my head or actors getting in the way, their mannerisms, their tics, their voices, the way they pronounce certain words, none of that, never mind the way they look or what they wear. But there's been a lot of Rebuses now. I mean, on radio, there's been several actors played Rebus. On screen, we've had at least 3. We're about to have a 4th. In the theatre, we've had 2 or 3 actors playing Rebus. So it's quite a lot of actors. Yeah, I mean, they're all impressions. They're all facets of Rebus, but nobody's quite 100% echt Rebus. Not yet. The TV reboot, which is happening next year. I mean, it's happened. It's filmed. It's in the can mostly. Hopefully on screens early next year. It's interesting because we've rebooted it, and so we've got a young Rebus. We've got a 40-year-old Rebus, so he is macho and manly and all the rest of it, and can run down a street chasing a suspect, but in the present day. So it's Rebus in the present day, but as a younger man. And I'll be intrigued to see. I think fans might go, wait a minute, but then I think after a little while they'll go, yeah, we're enjoying Rebus being Rebus. And the actor who plays him, Rick Rankin, no relation. There's no nepotism here at all. Who some people might know from Outlander. He's magnetic. You cannot take your eyes off him on screen, which is terrific. That's what you want from an actor who's playing a 3D larger than life character.
I saw on Twitter, and it was a couple of weeks ago, I've written down the 16th of October, upstairs front seat on the bus to Cromarty results.
Yeah.
And it just made me think it's such kind of a childlike innocence thing.
Oh no! Come on, look.
No, I love that.
If you took Arnold Schwarzenegger on the bus to the Black Elf from Inverness and he got the front seat, he'd be thrilled.
Absolutely, any of us would. What other?
It's so rare to get the front seat, and that's just so rare to get the front seat in the bus, isn't it?
Yeah, there's normally sullen teenagers sat there, and I can say that because they're probably one of my sullen teenagers.
No, I loved it, and yeah, I mean, it's. I go up there. I've got a house up in Cromarty, and I go there to write and to think and to sit and do research and everything else, but mostly just to switch off and decompress. I went up there in the middle of this bloody storm, which washed away half the path by the sea that I usually take every day. That happened after I left, but it did happen. And I went out of season, which meant half of Cromarty was shut for the winter. So it's a very different place from summer to autumn to winter. But I love it up there. When we first went up, when I first went there to write, there was no mobile phone signal, and we decided we would not have a TV. And in the early days, we didn't have internet, so I would write all day because there was nothing else to do. And then at night, I would go to the pub, have a meal, and connect to their Wi-Fi so I could check my emails. And it was just blissful. I mean, I got so much written so quickly. And I like writing quickly. I find writing quickly works for me because if I've got quite a complicated plot, it needs to be written quickly or I start to forget what the hell's going on. Because I don't do a lot of planning beforehand, very little planning beforehand. So I'm having to keep a lot of this in my head, a lot of these strands that hopefully will connect at some point, 20 or 30 different characters that you have to try and keep an eye on. If I write quickly, then I don't start to lose the place. So the first drafts are usually written in about 40 days. And
Wow.
it's skeletal. Some of it doesn't make sense. There's no real ending. But it's a start. It's a good start. So 40 days in Cromarty, and I kind of broken the back of a book.
Tracy Mains, who is Steve Kavanagh's wife, has asked, you've got one more Rebus book left in your contract with your publisher, Orion. Are you afraid to kill Rebus off?
I'm not afraid to kill him off. I mean, it's probably coming sometime. I mean, I thought I'd got rid of him at the end of Exit Music. I thought I was done with him. He refused to leave the building, but I can see us parting ways. If he stops being useful to me, the thing is, I get an idea, I get a theme I want to explore, and a plot that allows me to explore that theme, and then I decide which characters I need. And it's not always Rebus that I need, but mostly it has been. But maybe that will stop being the case at any point. Yeah, one more book, one more Rebus book, and then I'm free as a bird, free to retire. I'll be 60. When the book's published, I'll be 64. So when the paperback comes out, I'll be 65, which is a pretty good retirement age.
You could have decided to retire, at any point in the last few years, though. Do you really think you'd be able to just completely switch it off?
Yep. I never used to. I always thought writers write. That's what they do. They die in the office with their boots on and their hands on the keyboard. But you look around, you see writers, and you can see they're getting tired. They're getting a bit bored of their characters, or they're just going through it because the publisher or the audience demands another book, and their heart isn't in it anymore. You see that, and you hope you give up before that happens. You hope if you start to feel that, you just walk away and say, "I'm done." I'm so respectful of Lee Child, who has got one of the most successful franchises on the planet, and has just walked away, given it to his brother, and just walked away. He's done. And my wife, I think, has been preparing me subtly for retirement.
This is going to be good. Okay, well, let's go.
This year has been my sabbatical year, right? This year, she said, you're going to take a year off. You're not going to do any festivals. You're not going to take on any new projects. We're just going to go and travel and have holidays and have some fun while we've still got all our faculties and we can still walk unaided. So we've done it, and we've had a really great year. We've had a fantastic year. We've been to lots of places and had lots of adventures. And I think she's trying to get me used to that as being something that we should do more of, and I should possibly write less.
You have just confirmed exactly what I thought, which is she's a wise woman.
She's a wise woman. Yeah.
Do you think you would do what Lee Child has done, which is not writing, but carry on visiting the festivals? Lindsay Lynn actually asked earlier about Scott's authors. Who are you loving at the moment? Do you think you would kind of go around and maybe have a new blood like Val McDermid, kind of bring on the next generation, help the mid-listers? Or do you think you'll just be done?
Oh, no, I mean, the crime writing community and the crime fan community are just huge, warm, cuddly places to be. I always love going to the festivals. I love meeting the readers and the writers, discover new voices, discover new writers, giving them a quote for their new book, if possible. Yeah, I can't see why I would need to give that up, and I probably wouldn't give that up because I'd still be reading crime fiction, even if I stopped writing it. And I mean, what my wife is saying is, look, just don't sign another contract. And if you get burning desire to write a book. If a big idea comes and
Mm.
it just, you can't shake it off, then you can sit and write the book at your own speed, at your own leisure. But you're not stuck having to deliver it by a certain time or to a certain number of words. And it can be anything you want. It can be something a bit different, maybe.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's feasible. That's feasible. I'm definitely slowing down as I get older. I mean, when I was young, I was writing 2 books a year. I mean, I wasn't making enough money to survive on one book, so I had to write 2 books a year. But I could write 2 books a year. Now I'm really struggling to write one book every 2 years because the ideas don't come as readily as they used to. And the physical act of writing gets harder. I'm not the only writer who said that, a successful writer who
Yeah.
said that. We have this conversation a lot about how it used to be I could sit at my laptop for 10 hours at a stretch. I would skip lunch. I was fueled by coffee or Coca-Cola, and I'd just keep writing for 10 hours. Now I do half an hour and I'm knackered. And I've got to walk away and stretch, my back, my shoulders. I'll make a cup of
Mm.
tea. I'll sit, check my emails, go back again, try another half hour. Um, it's a physical thing. I mean, it's a mental thing. Of course, it's mentally draining, but it's also physically draining when you're sitting on this chair and you can tell I twitch I'm sitting in this bloody chair and you're sort of working away and you're tensed at the shoulders and your hands are all getting gnarled.
Mm.
Yeah, frustratingly, it doesn't get any easier. When I was young, I used to think, oh, this will get easier. Once you've learned how to do it, it'll be like stripping a car engine. You can do it blindfold. No, it gets harder. And it partly gets harder because you are looking at the competition. You want to keep being relevant. You want to keep writing great books. You want your next book to be better than the book before it. And that's hard.
Mm.
It's hard to try and keep pushing like that. But if you start coasting, readers very quickly realize, I think,
Yeah.
that you're coasting, and the books suffer as a result.
Malcolm Hollindrake has asked, would short story writing interest you? So if you didn't fancy writing full books anymore, do you think you'd just carry on writing shorts?
If I got ideas, I mean, yeah, a few years ago, I took a bit of a sabbatical and I just started writing little short stories for fun, never to be shown to anybody. 2-3 page stories, 5 pages, 10 pages. I must have written 20 or 30 that I was never going to show to anybody. There's something lovely about a short story. You start the day with nothing and you end the day with something that's never been in the world before. You have created something from nothing in a day or a couple of days. I think that's amazing. I still think it's extraordinary. It's the most extraordinary thing to me that with the 26 letters of the alphabet available to us, anybody listening or watching tonight could go away and write a sentence that's never been written before in human history. We could all do it. And I just think stories are wonderful things. But they're quite hard as well because you've got to get the idea. And sometimes the idea you get for a short story is enough of an idea to make a novel. So why not write a novel instead of a short story? But I do enjoy reading short stories. And I do think, I mean, this Amazon thing that I've taken on, one of the things that interested me was this notion of people's attention span apparently shortening while novels are getting longer, weirdly. That people's attention spans are shortening. You would think we were right for short stories. If you're in a commute, if you're on a train or a bus, or even listening in the car, a short story is the perfect length for you going to work, coming home from work, chilling out at lunchtime as you sit and eat your sandwich. You can just lose yourself in another world for half an hour or an hour, and it can be therapeutic. It can be consoling. It can be exciting. So I think short stories are due a big comeback, and I'm kind of hoping that the TikTok generation of young people who know what TikTok is, I don't, will come along and start championing the short story as the perfect form for people who think that even a rebus novel is TLDR, too long, couldn't read.
I like that. I know what TikTok is. I just can't access my account.
Yeah.
Never actually used it. When I had COVID, I set up a book club account and one for myself. We've got followers. I'm following people. Can't get in it at the moment.
Oh,
I'll
geez.
figure it out one day
Well,
when I've got some
I
more
got
time.
banned. I tried to join Facebook a long time ago, and I got banned because someone said I was impersonating Ian Rankin, and Facebook blocked me and said I had to prove I was Ian Rankin before they would let me back in again. I said, "Well, I know I'm Ian Rankin," but they wouldn't let me back in. So I rejoined a little while ago as Jack Harvey. But
I
yeah, for
have
a long
seen
time.
that. I didn't know if it was really you or not. And then I saw that you're friends with
Yeah,
some people that
again, I thought,
I
shit,
thought, yeah.
I'm going to get blocked again. I thought, I'm going to get blocked again because folk are going, is that really you, Ian? Is that really you? Is that really you on Threads? Is that really you on Blue Sky? Oh, for God's sake. Wasn't life a lot simpler when we just had, I don't know, books?
One of the questions I was actually going to ask you is based on kind of useless technology and the things that we miss. So I was reading something and there were things, and I did make a note, but there are a lot of notes on my desk and it could be anywhere, quite frankly. Not a clue where I've written it. But there were lots of different things like what's wrong with just having, you don't need a fridge that talks to you or an air fryer that connects to your Wi-Fi. What kind of things do you miss that have been really overcomplicated? And I had to think about what I would say. And I miss getting handwritten letters. Me and my cousin Joanne, we used to write to each other, and I've had pen pals, and I kind of miss that handwritten feeling. Emails, brilliant, obviously. Facebook messages, great, but there must be so many things that we're worse off for.
Yeah, I mean, the handwritten letters, you're right, used to be a real thrill. When we lived in France, I mean, this is pre-internet again, and international phone calls were horrendously expensive. We lived for the airmail letters that would arrive, maybe once a week from friends or relations back in the UK. Yeah, and I still get, occasionally I get handwritten letters. I tend not to send them because my handwriting is so absolutely shocking that it's got to be in big capital letters. Every single word's got to be in capital letters or no one can read it. But yeah, but then the person who wrote me a handwritten letter was in their 90s. So maybe it's an age thing. It was a lovely thing. But then do you remember when you were a kid and you had to write all those bloody thank you cards for Christmas presents and birthday presents? Well, that was a pain in the arse. It'd be much easier just to send a text. If you were a kid, you'd much rather just send a text. TY, LOL.
Maybe a kiss if you really like someone. Well, what a thing to end on. I am actually going to throw in one Halloween-based question because it feels remiss not to, considering it is
Yeah.
Halloween.
I'm
I
wearing my
messaged
Halloween
Emily.
costume. I'm wearing my Halloween costume.
I messaged Emily and asked her, would you be dressing up? I said I wasn't planning to, but I didn't want to let the side down. I have got kind of little, you can't even see them, but, little
Ah,
things that I've added in that you can't really see. I've got a rat somewhere. Very careful not to have any arachnids because I understand how upsetting they can be for some people. So left those out. But I thought, if you were going to come dressed as anyone, who would it be? And I thought it's really kind of, the obvious ones, Ian Rankinstein.
oh,
I
Rankinstein.
thought
Very
that was
good.
pretty good.
Very
I
good.
was
I
quite
did
pleased with
once,
myself.
when I was a student, I remember the only fancy dress party I remember ever making any effort on. I went as Alex from A Clockwork Orange, the fancy dress party with the bowler hat and the kind of one eyelash and everything. But that's the only time I can ever remember dressing up. I'm not really a Halloweeny person. And I live in a block where there are no kids for whatever reason. So I know damn fine I don't need any sweets. Unless I want to buy them, pretend I'm going to hand them out to the kids, but actually I'm going to eat them all myself, which is what most adults do, let's be honest. You hope nobody rings that bell so you can sit afterwards about 10 o'clock at night and demolish all those little mini Mars bars you bought. No, I was on a TV show yesterday. What was it called? Steph's Packed
Steph's
Lunch.
Pat Lunch.
And they were talking about trick or treating, and it really started to annoy me. Trick or treat, trick or treat, trick or treat. And then they came to me and said, Ian, what do you think? I said, well, in Scotland, we'd never had trick or treat. We called it guising. And hopefully some people in Scotland still do call it that. You kind of dress up in disguise and you go along and you would tell a joke or you would sing a song and you didn't want sweets. You wanted cold, hard cash. And the money was going to be used to buy fireworks. So I remember when I was a kid doing that, and you would go to complete strangers' houses and just knock on the door and you would tell them a joke or sing them a song. And you get a few pennies, you get maybe a shilling or a sixpence or something. Those were the days, and you would have worked for it because we didn't have pumpkins. We had turnips, swede, which is almost impossible to carve without killing yourself. So you'd have all these kids with gashes in their hands and arms and wrists getting taken to A&E on a nightly basis on the run up to Halloween, as they tried to carve a foul smelling turnip into something recognizable. You put a little candle in it and then you'd have the smell of burning swede. which is not the most pleasant thing in the world. But yeah, happy Halloween, everybody.
Thank you so much to everybody. Have been trying to scroll through the questions and just see them in amongst all of the lovely comments about your books and Rebus, and how lovely it is to see you and how grateful people are for you writing such wonderful things. So thank you to everyone who has joined. Thank you, Surrey and Rankin, for coming and joining us on the UK Crime Book Club. And we hope that you do keep writing, even something every 2 or 3 years, for much longer.
If the good Lord spares me.
Cheers.
Slange. Thanks, everybody.